Hey folks, welcome to another lesson. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you an actual combat mechanic you will be using all the time. To do so, we're going to go into the dojo and into the training ground. If you haven't already done so, make sure you go through the basic actions tutorial in case you are confused about how to basically play the game. Let's go into the training ground. You don't get anything like any rewards, you don't get any points or anything like that. This is simply a place to practice, which is exactly what we need to do. We're going to get a little prompt that's going to tell you what's available here. You can fight a bunch of different enemies here. Unfortunately, not all of them, but a bunch of them. And you don't have to worry about items or ammunition whatsoever, and you can kind of just mess around with loadouts and various things here. Take some time to explore this area. It's quite useful, especially in the beginning. So the mechanic that I'm going to teach you today is the key pulse mechanic, but in order to understand why the key pulse mechanic is so valuable, we need to discuss what ki is in the first place, so that's why I'm going to go to the status and just show you what ki is. So if you've played any Souls-like game, there's usually like a stamina mechanic that you need to manage. And so it's in this game, it's ki. Stamina is a core stat, as you can see above, and we've talked about this in the previous video. But ki is very similar to stamina from other games, and Nioh separates itself via the key pulse mechanic, which is so good. Surprise, surprise, ki is used whenever you attack, is whenever you dodge, whenever you're blocking, and an enemy hits you, it requires some level of ki in order to ward that off. Now, if I was playing very much a traditional Souls-like, I want you to pay attention to how many attacks I can get off by just mashing square. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's it. That's literally all you can do if you do not take advantage of the key pulse mechanic. Now, what is the key pulse mechanic? Now, after attack strings, if you press R1, you will regain a portion of the ki that was used. This is huge. Now, before I get into depth in that, let's show you just how many more attacks I can get off if I use key pulse. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 or 17, whatever. But like 10 more attacks without having to pause to regenerate my ki. That's huge. So what this enables you to do is take many more actions. You know, you can do that, run away, dodge away, whatever, and it just makes combat that much more fluid. There is another reason to ki pulse besides just regenerating your ki, and let me explain a few of those reasons. Ki pulsing, perfect ki pulsing, and I'll explain how to perfect ki pulse, but if you get a perfect ki pulse in low stance, you get a free dodge. In mid stance, a perfect ki pulse will give you a free guard or block. In high stance, you get extra damage on your next attack. This is super useful. If you do a perfect ki pulse in a Yokai realm, then you will get anima back. So how do you do a perfect ki pulse? When do you do a ki pulse in the first place? Now, I've already stated that you do it after attacks, but when exactly do you press R1? So there's two ways that I would advise you to learn this. So first, let's take a look at the key bar, and you're going to notice something. You see how there's a red portion and there was kind of a blue portion that was filling up? So as soon as you're done with your attacks, you can just press R1, and you'll regenerate some ki, but you won't get that much back, but you can act more quickly. So it's one of those decisions you'll have to make. But when do you perfect ki pulse? All right, let's answer that, because it's easy to just press R1 after attacks. Just spam it like I'm doing right now. But when do you do the perfect ki pulse? So take a look at my key bar, and what I'm doing is waiting until the last possible moment when that blue bar completely fills up the red bar to press R1. This is very similar to the concept of tactical reloads from Gears of War, in which you had a specific timing to reload in order to get a whole host of benefits. I've already covered the benefits here with the whole free dodge, free block, extra damage stuff, but here you'll get extra ki as well. So there's, again, one way to look at it is to look at your key bar, which can be very helpful, but there's another visual way. Now let's take a look at my actual character. So focus on the character and the visual effects that are surrounding it. See how there's kind of like blue energy kind of coming around, and then it looks like there was a brief pulse around there going on. There's kind of a sound effect, right? It almost looks like flower petals. So if you press R1 just when it shimmies, or shimmers, then you'll get the perfect key pulse as well. And you'll hear that sound effect. You'll see it looks like a shockwave kind of coming out of your character. That's a perfect key pulse. So two ways: you can look at your key bar or you can look at your character. Eventually, as you get familiar with your character and the attack animations, you'll kind of just be able to do it on instinct. So make sure you practice this. You need to be able to key pulse on demand after basically any action, any attack at least, and you need to get used to using the perfect key pulse. Now again, the pros and cons of key pulsing early are simply that you can act more quickly, but it comes at the expense of getting less ki and not being able to tap into those benefits that I described here. And then the benefit of being able to get anima back, and I'll talk about anima stuff in a future video, but you won't be able to get into these benefits if you do not know how to perfect key pulse. So very, very valuable. So make sure you learn this and practice this until you can get them down consistently. Also, there's a matter, so I did just touch on this, the Yokai realm. What the heck is a Yokai realm? Let's go show what it is and why it's important to key pulse in the first place. Oh yeah, and you can see I'm just gonna let myself get clobbered and whatnot, because this is quite you don't have to worry about dying or anything like that. See, I'm at low health, and watch what happens to my health. Goes back to full. Alright, so what is a Yokai realm? I need him to generate it. Please generate it. Okay, you see that little puddle that he generated right around him? That is a Yokai realm. Alright, so I'm gonna deplete my ki right now. And I want you to notice how painfully slow my ki regeneration is. Oh my god, it's so bad. But it gets immediately better when I am not in the Yokai realm. Alright? So how do you get rid of it? All you gotta do, just key pulse. That's it. You key pulse, you get rid of it. So get in the habit of key pulsing. Also... Alright, let me just kill this guy, because you're done. You're retired. Alright, you're retired. It's time to go home. Oh my god, I don't care. I don't care. Yes, beat me to death. Guess what? You're dead. So if you perfect key pulse that, you'll get anima back, and if you just key pulse it normally, you'll get rid of it. But you gotta make sure to key pulse, otherwise you are going to struggle in this game. It is an absolutely core mechanic. So practice that. Now, you know how I was talking about perfect key pulsing in different stances, so why would I want to be in different stances? In fact, how do I even switch to stances? How do they work? So, in order to be in a stance, make sure you're holding R1, and then picking the stance of your choice with the assigned button. So high stance is R1 triangle, mid stance is R1 square, low stance is R1 X or cross, whatever you want to call it. There is R1 circle, but it's just sheathing your weapon and it's not stance dependent. So yeah, you can do that. Now, what are the pros and cons of each stances? Believe it or not, there is no super stance. There's no like, this is the best stance in the game. In my opinion, each stance is great, has unique things that it can do, and the best players use all three of them whenever possible. They're really good. So let's talk about each of them first. What is high stance? High stance in general has the slowest but strongest attacks and eats up the most ki. Also, the dodge behavior is as such. It consumes a lot of ki, and it's pretty much always a fat roll. Why would you want to do a fat roll? It's a good question. You usually cover the most dodge distance, and you will have what are referred to as iframes. All dodges have iframes, but what are iframes? Iframes are basically a brief period of invulnerability. So with high stance, you actually get just a little, I think you get the most, yes, you get the most amount of iframes per dodge, but it also has a lot of recovery. So bear that in mind. Mid stance is generally good for defensive purposes, and it's kind of like your balanced all-around stance, all-purpose stuff. Again, it can't do as much damage on average as high stance does, but it's still a pretty good option. And again, there is no best stance. What does mid stance do that other stances do not? So I want you to pay attention to high stance. I'm going to deplete my ki, and then I'm going to block. All right. I'm blocking and I'm moving around. I do not regenerate ki. If I'm blocking and I stand in place, I will regenerate ki, albeit very slowly. Now I'm going to switch to mid stance while I'm blocking and watch what happens to my ki bar. It will regenerate. So mid stance is very good for defensive related things, and this is just a nice little thing to have. So it doesn't matter if you're moving in place, moving around or staying in place, you'll still regenerate your ki, albeit slowly, with mid stance. So yeah, mid stance is kind of balanced. Now, what about its dodge behavior? So normally, just one tap will give you a quick little dash. It'll still eat up a good amount of ki, but it's not nearly as bad as high stance. All right. Now, mid stance, if you double tap, you'll do a dash into a roll. So yeah, it's pretty handy. But it doesn't eat up as much ki, but you can't do on-demand rolls if you want. Now let's get to low stance. Low stance has the quickest attacks, has the least ki consumption in general, but also has the lowest damage. So it's fast, low damage, but you don't eat up as much. Low stance, dodge behavior is different for sword and spear, but just assume it's kind of the same in regards to the principle is more or less the same. You will eat very little ki dodging in low stance. This little animation is unique to sword and spear, but as you can see, regardless, I can dodge pretty darn quickly. And that's really nice. It has the least the least invulnerability frames compared to high stance, but you can dodge more frequently, so it'll work in your favor. In general, I'd advise dodging in low stance when you're first starting out. If you want to just get quick hits, do so. If you want to do stronger attacks, do high stance attacks, and then if you're just, I guess, want to play it safe, go for mid stance. But again, use each of these, and you will go very far. There is one thing that I do have to mention when it comes to low stance. This is something I'll have to follow up in a future video involving skills, but we're not there just yet, because unfortunately we don't have any skill points for the weapons, so how are we going to work with that? But low stance, and this applies, I believe, to all weapons, maybe not the fists, but just treat it as a rule of thumb. If you do combo chains with skill enders, so for example, let's say I have, I need something in low stance. Give me something in low stance! Okay, let's say I do kick in low stance, right? Now, if I wait until the ki starts generating, as opposed to trying to do it as early as possible, then I will kind of do a ki pulse. It's kind of a weird thing. I'll have to show it to you in a follow-up video, but I don't know why that's the case, but it just happens to be the case. But let's just review what we've covered before I let you guys go. You've got the ki pulse mechanic, which allows you to mindfully regenerate your ki and take more actions in general. It is super good, and you gotta learn it. You can ki pulse really early, so you can take actions earlier at the expense of using more ki. Losing more ki. Or if you wait till the last moment, you can do what's referred to as a perfect ki pulse, and eventually you will get benefits for doing so. On top of what you already have, which is when you see yokai realms, which you want to get rid of, and you just get rid of normally via ki pulsing. But if you do a perfect one, you get anima back, which I'll talk about in a future video. There's so much to cover, it's crazy. There's also 3 stances. In general, high stance is slow but very powerful. Mid stance is balanced and overall very good for defensive base play. Low stance is very fast and very good for evasive base play. So bear that in mind. Make sure you practice this, as we've got a ton of other concepts to get through. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate this support, and I will see you guys in the next lesson.